introduction to the Canadian Construction Sustainability Alliance. It's a coalition of general contractors. I'll give you more information about that. But really the focus is on on-site emissions, and that was the first initiative that we had as part of the coalition. So the Canadian, we have a little bit more people coming in. Okay, so the Canadian Construction Sustainability Alliance is a coalition of 9 general contractors in Canada. You can see the logos of the contractors that are involved in this coalition. We have AECON, Bird, Chandos, EllisDon, Graham, Ledcor, Multiplex, PCL, and Pomerleau. So it's a really good representation of general contractors in the Canadian sector. It's really represents what we as general contractors, what is our focus and what we are trying to achieve in the industry or steer the industry towards. So this is a voluntary coalition. We've came together self-organized, which is pretty unique in this kind of space. And really focusing on advancing national housing and infrastructure goals. We've partnered with an organization called Transition Accelerator to deliver a very comprehensive analysis of job site emissions. So this is our first phase of the initiative of the Alliance, with a focus of what do we need to focus on to reduce emissions on the construction sites. We've identified 5 high-impact actions that companies should start implementing to reduce emissions. I'll give you kind of all the details about that. And together, really, we work together to project a common voice, a single voice from the general contractors to really push the industry towards decarbonization and low-carbon construction. So why are we doing this? Construction is critical in Canada's housing, infrastructure, and economic growth goals. There's a lot of challenges that we are facing in the construction industry. High material costs, labor shortages, raising climate expectations. So there's a lot that we are dealing with. So really the value of decarbonization is, first of all, the construction emissions, so construction stage emissions, are often very underestimated. We don't have a lot of, or we haven't had a lot of data to show what does that really represent in the grand scheme of a building. So if you look at the full life cycle of a building, the construction stage emissions are heavily underestimated. If you look at life cycle assessment, different tools, kind of the percentage that they provide, they're they're generally smaller than they should be. Emission reductions, it's not just about emission reduction. It's also about being more efficient on our sites. Fuel costs, reducing fuel costs, reducing downtime, and then accelerating timelines. So it's really, we're not just talking about how we can help the environment or help climate change. It's how we can make our construction sites more efficient. And then construction offers no regret pathways to build faster and cleaner. So this comprehensive analysis that we've done, through this coalition, the 9 companies that have been involved as part of this coalition, we agreed that we're all going to share data across our projects. So data across more than 600 projects was shared, and thanks to Transition Accelerator, they did a lot of the heavy lifting in the analysis of all this massive amount of data that we dumped on them. And all this data was broken down into projects by type, activity, fuel, and location. And also note that it's all different types of construction across nationally. So different regions, different types of construction, buildings, infrastructure, so a wide range of different types. And the analysis focused on energy use during on-site, so really focusing on this on-site construction activities. On this pie chart, you'll see kind of the different types of fuel that we've identified through this analysis, and you can see there's a very heavy reliance on diesel. So when we went to analyze all this data, or really the Transition Accelerator was analyzing the data, there were 4 key dimensions that the data was analyzed against. Technical readiness, so is the technology mature and is it available, particularly in the Canadian market? Economic viabilities, what are the costs involved? What is the payback period? What are the savings that can be achieved? Operational feasibility, what does it take to integrate new technology, and what are the training needs that are required? And then finally, and one of the more challenging ones, is that behavior change or behavior acceptance. So getting our staff, people on the site, to change the ways that they've been doing things on the construction site, and looking at new technologies, new smart solutions, really identifying how we can really change the ways to make a construction more efficient. So this is really the meat of this report, the 5 high-impact actions that we've identified through this analysis. I'll quickly go through each one of them, and we'll talk more from our different perspectives in the companies as well. So light-duty vehicles and equipment electrification, so really the focus is electrification of vehicles and smaller tools on the construction site. A lot of those solutions are already mature, they're already available in the market, and there's a significant opportunity to reduce emissions there. Heating optimization and electrification. A lot of people don't realize how much goes into keeping our construction sites operating during the winter. So there's a really significant need for heating. There's a lot of energy that goes into providing enough heat to keep our projects operating, particularly in our climate. If you go further north, even more. So looking at optimizing, implementing smart systems on our heating, and then also looking at electrified solutions, that provides a very key opportunity to reduce emissions, and also making our sites more efficient, because using less fuel and being more smart about how we're heating our projects. Renewable diesel as a bridge fuel. So as you saw in the previous slide, we are so heavily reliant on diesel. Looking at alternative fuels that can be substituted. Renewable diesel is a drop-in fuel, so it's something that can be really used on any diesel equipment, so nothing needs to be changed about the equipment, and there's a huge opportunity to reduce emissions by switching to renewable diesel. Generators, again, that's a big source of emissions for a construction site. So looking at grid and connecting to the grid early in the construction site, having that connection early, eliminates a lot of emissions, and then also hybrid power solutions for the generators. And then finally, number 5 is excavation equipment. So hybrid and electric excavation materials. Those early stages of the project, that excavation, earthworks, civil works, that takes a whole lot of energy or fuel to make it happen. So looking at those alternative equipment that maybe are not as mature in the Canadian market yet, you can see solutions in other parts of the world, but that's definitely something that is coming more and more to our market, and looking at opportunities for those alternative larger equipment, so hybrid and electric. So from looking at what is the timeline, when can we achieve a lot of these emissions? We've identified what is the very kind of realistic opportunity to reduce emissions if we incorporate all these 5 high impact actions. So we looked at by 2040, we expect 75% reduction in job site emissions. So a very significant opportunity there, again, not just for emissions, but also from an efficiency perspective, and a lot of new technology that is coming in, that is maturing, that is becoming more available in our industry, which is kind of, you see kind of that 5-year jump. You can see more and more is becoming available and would be incorporated into construction sites. So really, now that we have this report, I'll make sure to give you a QR code at the end for the report as well. But right now, our focus is to engage stakeholders, to get everybody else that is involved, that plays a critical role in the industry, to come along on this journey with us, to project our common voice, our collective voice as general contractors, that we all want to reduce emissions on our site. We want lower carbon construction sites, and we are engaging with construction companies beyond the 9 that are part of the alliance, engaging with equipment manufacturers, utility and energy providers. So that's kind of the electric suppliers to really get those grid connections early and streamline those processes. Fuel distributors, making sure that we have renewable diesel available across different regions of Canada. And then, of course, government plays a big role as well in terms of the policy and public procurement requirements. So really, it's enabling market transformation. The 5 high-impact actions represent more than individual initiatives. They form a coordinated strategy. And really, it's about the 3 critical business dimensions. So it's not just decarbonization, which is key, but it's also about growth and performance. So that's how we identify those priority actions, is that overlap of all 3, growth, performance, and decarbonization. So this is the report. Again, I'll share the QR code for it at the end, but at this point, I'll give the floor to Prab to provide the AECON perspective.
Thank you so much, Anya, and thank you for setting us up to talk about what each of us are doing at our own companies in terms of those 5 actions. So we'll kind of get into some case studies and some examples. So to kick it off, if you haven't heard of AECON, we built that really tall tower downtown Toronto called the CN Tower. I always like to say that as our claim to fame. Amongst other large infrastructure projects across Canada, fiber optic for Highway 401, Gardner Project Phase 1. So we do, most of the projects that we do are what we call horizontal infrastructure, so roads, bridges, energy, utilities. We don't do a lot of building work. In terms of our profile itself, so this is sort of a glimpse, this is taken out of our sustainability report. About a $4 billion company. We have a social impact program that does charitable giving and sponsorships. Currently, we are at a 34% reduction in our emissions with a baseline since 2020. So we had set a goal of reducing our emissions, our direct emissions, by 30% by 2030, and we were able to surpass that, and we're at 34% right now. Some other key stats I'd like to mention is that, that we track our revenue related to sustainability-related infrastructure projects, and we're at about 60%. What constitutes as a sustainability-related infrastructure project is projects related to decarbonization, the energy transition, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and sustainable transportation. Some of our recent industry recognition, in 2025, we were recognized as Canada's greenest employer. A lot of that has to do with the sustainability-related policies and benefits that we have internally for our employees, and I'll talk a little more about them. There's an organization called the Science-Based Target Initiative. It's an external governing body that looks at companies' emissions reduction targets. It's kind of the industry standard for emission reduction targets, and we have our targets validated by them. We are a participant of the Government of Canada's Net Zero Challenge. So this was introduced by the government a couple years ago now, and a lot of the GCs mentioned in our working group are a part of it as well. So the Government of Canada has this Net Zero Challenge. It's when you're signed up to it, you have to have a net zero target and also be able to outline what your strategy is to get to net zero. We built the Gordie Howe International Bridge from Windsor to Detroit, and for that we had recently won a Social Responsibility Award, and we have silver certification as it relates to our Indigenous procurement program. So going into a little more about our strategy. So our sustainability strategy is divided into two key pillars. The two pillars are what we build and how we build it. So the what we build is really about the infrastructure projects that we take on related to sustainability. So a lot of my role as VP relates to working with our clients on opportunities for clean energy assets, helping our clients meet their own decarbonization goals, looking for opportunities related to sustainability, climate change mitigation and adaptation. And then the second pillar is about how we build. So, once we have the projects, it's really about the key initiatives that we're taking in our approach to construction and integrating sustainability into our construction practices. So on the what we build, wanted to share some examples of some of the sustainability-related infrastructure projects that we have across Canada, the U.S., as well as the Caribbean. So renewable energy projects, as an example, we're doing the John Hart Dam project in BC. We're also doing district energy projects with Enwave in the city of Toronto. Climate change mitigation and adaptation, so a lot of that has to do with, right now, sustainable transportation projects. And also we do support, water management, flooding, mitigation projects as well. On the energy transition side, we were involved in the Oneida Energy Storage Project. If you haven't heard of that project, that was, it's one of the world's largest battery storage projects and Canada's first battery storage project of this size. And then essential services, so wastewater management, waste treatment facilities, and then also we are involved in highway projects as well, and one might ask, how are highway projects sustainable? So some of the highway projects that we're involved in, we do work on HOV lanes, multi-use access, pedestrian access, bike lanes, et cetera. So that's on the what we build. So some project highlights where projects are located sort of across Canada. I won't go through all of these, but you might be familiar with them. You might have seen AECON trucks in and around these projects, but just to kind of give you an example of the types of projects we're involved in. So on the how we build, the second pillar of our sustainability strategy. So this is all about how we are integrating sustainability into our operations. And that's everything from the type of equipment we're using, the type of fuel we're using, how we're engaging our employees, different training programs for employees. And I'll go through more about those in detail. So in terms of our own reduction goals, so we have the goal of getting to net zero with a new interim goal of 50% reduction by 2040. So this is something we publish every year in our sustainability report. It kind of gives you a sense of where we started in 2020 with our baseline, and then the different notable sustainability initiatives that we've implemented throughout this timeline that's helped to achieve that 34% reduction. So everything from hybrid electric equipment, solar-powered equipment. We've started installing EV charging stations across our facilities, and this is really to facilitate the future use of EV vehicles and EV construction equipment as well. We use renewable diesel on site whenever it is available. And then some of the sort of, I guess, newer research and innovation is around development of low carbon materials. So we've started to test out low carbon concrete on some of our sites. We built a structure, we partnered with a local company and built a structure which is essentially a utility shed that used carbon negative concrete blocks. So just to give you an example of some of the innovative initiatives. Decarbonization roadmap, I won't go over this, and it's purposely in small font so that you will go on our website to read it instead. But this is essentially our decarbonization roadmap that talks about all of the specific initiatives that we are implementing and planning to implement on our road to net zero to 2050. And we've divided them up into specific operational initiatives, and then how we're engaging with our supply chain and our employees, and then some on the innovation side, so newer ideas, mostly around sort of sustainable materials, and then how we're procuring goods and services. So now I'll talk about those 5 specific actions, and I'll kind of go into some of the examples of initiatives that we've implemented across our operations, getting very specific on the actual equipment that we're testing and the different types of materials. So equipment efficiency, our plan is really on equipment efficiency is to look at options that are reducing fuel in equipment use, and then looking at hybrid, and then looking at electric. So that's sort of the trajectory that we're following. So this is an example of a unit that we used at the Darlington nuclear site. It's called the Base Camp 3-in-1. It does run on diesel, but it's a light tower, generator, and heater all in one. We did a trial with it, and our teams came back to us and told us that they're saving about $2,000 of fuel a week, so hence relating to the emissions reduction. We use renewable fuels, like I mentioned. That was the shed that I was mentioning that we built with low carbon concrete. And then example of fleet electrification, so we are installing those charging stations. This is actually an interesting one because now we're starting to see these types of requests come directly from our clients, where our clients are asking us to use electric fleet in our operations, as well as electric construction equipment. We worked with Volvo to start to test out the mini series of construction equipment where electric options are starting to become available on the market. So we had tested out a Volvo electric mini excavator on one of our utilities projects where we were doing installation of fiber optic cable downtown Toronto. And then research and development. So an example of that is we've partnered with Concordia University. Concordia received one of the largest research grants, which relates to greening the construction industry. So we've partnered with them to look for opportunities to do trials with some of the research that's happening in sustainable construction there. Wanted to mention another example of innovation specifically in the circular economy, so not directly related to emissions reduction, but it would be our indirect emissions. And we partnered with an organization in BC where they collected plastic waste off of one of our construction projects. And the plastic waste was actually being input into another construction material, which is the Infinitex Void Deck. So it's patented network of egg-shaped spheres that could be used instead of concrete on sidewalks. So just an example of sort of like the innovative research and innovation that we're looking at. This is just one small example, but plastics is a focus for us as well. Looking at the amount of plastics on a construction site, calculating that data, and then looking for opportunities to recycle it. So Anya had mentioned 5 key actions, and I'm going to talk about 3 that we're focused on. The first one is accelerating electrification of light-duty vehicles, lighting, and tools. So this is kind of like your construction site accessories, light towers, and small generators. So our sort of plan for our fleet has been that the first priority is right sizing. So ensuring that our employees have the right size vehicle. So if someone needs a small vehicle, but they're driving a pickup truck, there's an opportunity for savings there. So right sizing is the first priority, and then hybrid is the second one. So looking at hybrid and plug-in hybrid options as well, and then electric as it becomes more available on the market, and there's a business case to support it as well. Installation of EV charging stations. So we did make use of the federal funding, the zero electric vehicle Emission Incentive Program. That's what the ZVIP stands for. And so they had funding at the federal level for charging stations, and we did make use of that. And we're slowly starting to install charging stations across our operations. And then use of low carbon lighting. And so we're starting to see, working with our suppliers, that more of these smaller site accessories on construction sites that you see, they're becoming more and more available. And not just becoming more available, but also we're seeing the prices come down as well. So this is a solar light tower that we used on our Kicking Horse Highway project in British Columbia. And great feedback from the team. There was a cost savings associated with it because there was no diesel generator attached to it. And now we plan on using, we're actually bringing it onto another site very soon. So action number 3, transition to renewable diesel. This is ongoing for us. We're focused on working through with the other 8 general contractors that we're working with. We want to look for ways to bring through aggregating our demand, look for ways to get to cost parity on renewable diesel wherever possible, and really helping to work with our suppliers to expand the availability of renewable diesel across Canada. The reason why renewable diesel is a key aspect of our emissions reduction in the construction industry is because it is a bridge fuel. It is a bridge solution. So while we're waiting for technology like electric construction equipment to become available and the cost to come down, renewable diesel is the best option we have, the most cost-effective option we have to reduce emissions on site. And you're looking at about a 20 to 80% reduction in emissions, depending on the blend of the renewable diesel. And then action number 5, incorporating hybrid and electric solutions for excavation as well as earthworks. So examples of some of the pilots that we've done. We did a pilot of the electric wheel loader in Alberta. So this is an example of where we did a pilot and we provided feedback to the manufacturer. We found that the battery life wasn't long enough to actually sustain an entire shift. So this is sort of an example of us, doing these pilots and getting this information and then feeding it back to the manufacturers to say, this is what worked and this is what didn't work. And they want that information from construction companies because it's the real world use cases. Electric telehandler, we've used this in a tunneling project in Ontario, and then I mentioned the mini excavator. So what our plan has sort of been with the construction equipment is really looking at the mini series of equipment because that's where we feel like there's the most options available. So the mini wheel loader, the mini excavator, they're faster to charge because they're smaller. You can actually charge them on regular level 2 charging stations, and then the battery life is long as well. So and the longevity of the battery life is there because the technology has been around longer, and of course because they're smaller. In conversations that we've had with manufacturers like Volvo, what they've said their trajectory for electric construction equipment is that they see it being sort of diversified solutions. So starting off with the hybrid options and then moving on to maybe plug-in hybrid, and then even looking at hydrogen-powered construction equipment as well as electric. So they're working on the battery technology. I wouldn't say the battery technology is completely there yet. They don't have large enough batteries to support machines like this size yet, but that's technology that they're working on. So in terms of employee engagement, we really take this stat seriously that 70% of employees want to work for and are attracted to companies that have sustainability mandates. So keeping this in mind, we have several ways that we're engaging our employees. We offer sustainability-related benefits. We have employee training. We do sustainability pilots on site that really helps to make sustainability real for employees, have events throughout the year, and have designated sustainability communications. So in terms of employee benefits, we have a health and wellness benefit that's offered to employees. We also have the same one, which is a green home energy benefit. And this is really to encourage our employees to take sustainability actions in their own lives. So as an example, if an employee implements or buys a smart thermostat, they can claim that. Or if they install solar panels or an EV station in their home, they can claim those initiatives through this Green Home Energy Benefit Program. We have a Sustainability 101 module. This is mandatory for all employees. This is part of employee onboarding. And this walks our employees through what sustainability is, what it means to the construction industry, what it means at AECON, what our specific sustainability policies are. And this is mandatory for every single employee. And then just some examples of different types of training programs that we have. We have a program to identify sustainability champions throughout the organization. These are people who either have a general interest in sustainability or they're interested in doing a pilot on their specific site. It could be anyone from a site supervisor to a project director, but these are essentially formulate our champions across the organization and people we would reach out to do some of the research and innovation that I spoke about. We offer different training programs related to sustainability frameworks like Envision, so that's ENVSP. So Envision is a sustainable infrastructure framework, and we offer it to our employees. We have over 100 employees trained in this framework. And then training, so those are the formal training courses, but we also partner with organizations like our suppliers to come in and do workshops for employees. So we've invited United Rentals, Lafarge, and then startup companies like Carbicrete, which is a low carbon concrete company, and we'll invite them to do sort of info sessions for employees. And they're very designated and specific as well. So sometimes we'll do them on a job site. So if we know that a client is looking for low carbon concrete options for a specific construction project, we'll actually bring in those suppliers and do those workshops on site for our employees. Sustainability on site, this is really important for us to do these pilots on site because this is what makes sustainability real for our employees. So as much as we can be, we're on site. I actually have a goal for my team that we have to do at least, we do 2 site visits a month, and that's where we're having conversations with our employees on site and talking to them about opportunities. So, what opportunities exist to be more efficient, innovative, what are some of the latest, what's some of the latest equipment, sustainable equipment that's available in the market. And this is where we seek out opportunities to do pilots on site as well. But what we appreciate about the pilots and what our employees appreciate is, again, not just does it make sustainability real for our employees, but it's an opportunity for us to get feedback from our employees on some of the equipment, the newer equipment that we're deploying on site and testing out. Some of the examples of the sustainability events we have, so we do a vendor showcase every year where we invite our suppliers to come out and showcase some of their sustainability related equipment, materials, and they'll actually bring some of it on site. Like we've had electric excavator parked in our lot where employees can go look at it. We do sustainability contests throughout the year, and then we are trying to strive towards no more single-use plastics at all our offices, but our Montreal office really took the lead on this one. And then every year we have a sustainability week, which we use for educational and training opportunities. And then lastly, shameless plug here, if you're interested in learning more about sustainable construction, we do have a podcast at AECON. It's called Road to Net Zero. It's something that I host, and it's all about talking all about sustainable construction in the industry and bringing in expert speakers from supply chain to government to clients, really talking about how the industry is moving towards sustainable and decarbonized operations. And then we have a sustainability report that we release every year. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Anya. My name is Aaron McLean. I'm with EllisDon. Great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for turning up. It's really an honor to be here to represent EllisDon, but more importantly, our alliance, which I think is a great initiative, and I'm really proud to be a part of it personally. I'm going to talk a little bit about EllisDon in general, give you some background there. I'll talk about what my group in EllisDon does as part of Sustainable Building Solutions, and then some of the initiatives and findings that we're doing, as well as our key focus in some of those impact areas that we talked about. So EllisDon in general, we're a construction services leader in the area. Been around this is our 75th year actually, so happy birthday to us coming up. And then 4,600 plus employees, about 9 billion annual revenue. Basically, we're involved with anything in the built environment from early stages right through to end of life. And we want to support anything that can be built in any way we can. So a little bit of a glimpse of where we've done work and where we're doing work. We do have projects across the globe, not all active, but our main focus is in Canada still. We have 13 offices in Canada and continue to be a leader in this country and the construction space. A little bit about our commitments as a company. First and foremost, health and safety. Second, sustainability, inclusive diversity, Indigenous relations, and community. We've done a lot, especially in recent years, for the ones below health and safety to really push them, including a lot of groups that we've started within the company for volunteers to help push those initiatives forward. Okay, so a little bit about what our group does to support sustainability, both within our own company and in the industry in general. SPS is what we call ourselves. There's a group of about 10 individuals dedicated within EllisDon to support sustainability initiatives and mandates and projects. You'll see on the right there, right to date, we've helped about 240 projects with some sort of sustainability mandate, worth about $70 billion so far. What we'll do as part of the team, I think the next slide will talk about that, we'll get involved with clients and projects to help make sure that if they have any of these goals that they want to achieve, we can guide them through it. So first of all, decarbonization, they know they want to, the project and the client maybe knows they want to set a target to lower the decarbonization, reduce their impact. We can get involved early, support that team, and come up with the best, most effective ways to do that. Obviously, green building certifications is a big part of our role. That's a common way for projects to sign up to an initiative that they know will help the environment, help contribute to decarbonization. So there's some examples there: LEED, zero carbon building, and WELL. And then climate resiliency. So another one that usually projects will get thinking about early. They'll do a risk assessment. They'll start to think, what's the risk from climate in this ever-changing environment that we live in, and what can we do to mitigate that and make sure that whatever we're building, or a project in the future will be resilient against those risks in the future. Okay, a little bit about our sustainability objective as a whole as a company. It's basically, it's all driven around driving down to zero emissions at the end of the day. We have three main key areas of focus for that. It's across our business operations, it's in the operations of the projects we build, and in the materials we procure. So as a Sustainable Building Solutions Group, or SPS, we will help to drive those initiatives. We'll set the targets internally, and then we'll also have to work with other groups across the industry, such as the Alliance and other groups, to help move those forward. So similar to Prab, I won't go through all of this. I'll just put it up as a way to show that how you might start to go about decarbonization when you're a company and you realize you have a lot to get through and a lot to tackle. This is focused around the three pillars I talked about. There's the next slide for the third pillar, which is maybe more of the focus of this discussion around site operations. One thing I noticed that was kind of interesting is that we published this last year, over a year ago, and we'll be coming up with a new report this year. And things change a little bit. You have to be pretty adaptable in terms of when you make a roadmap. In this space, especially, technology can change a lot. There'll be new initiatives that come on. So a lot of our work is around keying in on those initiatives, making sure we're aware of them, and making adjustments to our roadmap as needed to help make sure we're on the right track and the most effective track to achieve our end goal. One example of that here in the site operations is when we're talking about low carbon fuels. We noted here that we were obviously interested in biodiesel. That'll probably be updated, I think, to focus a little more on renewable diesel, which was an initiative that we got much more into last year once it became more available in the market. The trouble was before that it wasn't too available to us anyway in our market. So one of the great things about the Alliance is making sure we have the collective power to incite that demand for that product. And it's been going really well so far. In terms of our work in the industry in general, we alluded to this a little bit already, but it's about connecting with these other stakeholders. We can only do so much as a company on our own. We're usually beholden to the clients that we work for in terms of what they're asking us to do. We can certainly offer solutions that we think will make things the most efficient, but we look to them to tell us, what they want, and we'll tell them the best way to achieve it in the most effective way to decarbonize either that built product. The other thing that we try to work with a lot is the government. So advocate for regulations that help to steer us in the right direction. This is a plug to another group within our construction sciences department. This is the building and material sciences group. There's about another 10 or so individuals there. They're all experts around different types of materials and building materials, so concrete, timber, and envelopes primarily. So we lean on their technical expertise when it comes to engaging with suppliers and working with clients to maximize efficiency and decarbonize the product as much as possible. This is just a note about the importance of value in carbon in the materials that we buy. It's something that we're looking to move forward as much as possible and do upfront, so that it's considered at the same time as cost. So some of the products that are, maybe a focus around that obviously is concrete, but also alternatives to concrete, such as masonry and timber in some applications. This is just an example of a way to assess the impact of the material you buy before you buy it. So we've introduced a bid sheet for concrete suppliers that we're going to require them to state the global warming potential of the concrete that they're going to price for us up front, so we can consider that at the same time as we're considering their bid and price for that material. Getting that information up front is much more valuable than going through and agreeing to procure the material from them and then not understanding what the impacts of it are. Okay, this is a few slides about our pilot program that we launched about 5 years ago to start tracking our own site emissions. You'll see some similarities between this and some of the areas that Anya already mentioned through the Transition Accelerator. I just wanted to highlight a couple of maybe key examples to help support what that report was already finding. So here's the scope of the tracking pilot. I won't go through it all, but essentially we focus on the energy purchases that we're making on site, the fuels and things like that. The waste hauler is a big part of that as well, so we make sure we're collecting all the different waste streams data and the trips they're making, and then we're engaging our subtrades to be involved as well. We're only one part of the construction of a building. All our subtrades play a key role in that as well, so we're engaging them to submit their data to us as well, so we can understand how they contribute to the site emissions as well. This slide is just to show what Anya was alluding to as well in terms of the underrepresentation of site emissions in a building construction. What we're typically seeing, these are like 3 example projects, is that the on-site emissions, or the A5 stage emissions, are usually severely underestimated, or in some cases not considered at all when considering the life cycle assessment of a building. So when we kind of take the data that we're collecting and plug it against some of the LCA data, we see significant differences between the 2 emissions. The other thing that we're finding that's kind of interesting is around the potential impact from different trades or different scopes of work. So this is a snapshot of just collected emissions data for on-site fuel emissions from the different trades that have participated in our pilot project so far. This is a subset of 9 different pilot projects that are mostly completed. So obviously the biggest takeaway here is the impact from exterior earthworks and utility works as it relates to a building project, which often is excluded from the life cycle assessment of a building altogether, because it's not linked to a direct material or product. So collecting this data has really helped us kind of get a picture of where the bigger areas of focus could be if we were looking to work with our subtrades in terms of decarbonizing. Some other factors for on-site emissions, other than just, how much fuel you're using, is the scope and scale of the project we found. Just maybe that's obvious, but larger projects, they typically will produce more emissions. And then obviously, like I mentioned before, if it has more exterior works or more excavation, maybe it has a third level of underground parking that they needed to have, that all contributes to the on-site fuel usage. Schedule is a factor, because we have, as we mentioned, that heating plays a large role in our on-site emissions. So the longer the schedule, the more winters we have to go through and the more temporary heat we have to apply. The location matters too. Obviously, most areas in Canada have fairly cold winters, but locations where we've had projects a little more up north, we find that the heating there is a little more substantial, as well as remote locations tend to see a few more emissions impacts related to transportation of materials, because they're just not as centrally located to the supply points for those materials. Okay, now let's just talk about what some of the initiatives that we're currently focused on. So the first one here is temporary heating. We're approaching this kind of from three different ways all at once. First is effective enclosure. Often when you're in the middle of building a building, you're not quite fully enclosed, but you need to provide heat for the purposes of quality and to make sure, for example, the concrete's curing at the right temperature, things like that. So we're making sure that our teams and projects are considering the best way to enclose those temporary heated spaces so that they're not, essentially trying to heat the outdoors, we like to say. So that's one aspect. The second is smart heater controls. We find there's potential here for, in spaces that are relatively controlled and well enclosed, that if you apply a smart heater control, it gives them more control over the heat, the temperature, basically your smart thermostat that you might use at home, which obviously everyone kind of understands the benefits of using that at home. We think with technology that's out there and working with some of our vendors, applying it to the heaters, and it helps reduce emissions overall from that use. And then system design and performance. So this is more, making the right selection for the type of equipment you need to heat your space. Is it the right heater? Is it the right application? Could it be electric? Are you overheating? Do you have too many heaters? Those types of things. So it's choosing the right amount, thinking about it in advance is the key, and making sure you have that equipment when you need it. Just some examples of some projects that we've looked at where they've applied the smart heating controls I was mentioning, and then kind of the estimated efficiencies they found. So you can see here, the equivalent amount of fuel saved on these projects based on the amount of time that they were able to see that the heaters could shut down when they reached a certain temperature, equates to considerable savings. In these cases, and in most cases, we're finding if it's done right, that it can more than pay for the additional equipment that you need to run the smart controls. For us, like everyone else was saying, and the other Alliance members, renewable diesel is a big focus. So last year, we had it on 9 projects, which was approximately 130,000 liters, and equates to about 250 tons of CO2e avoided compared to regular diesel. And we're looking to increase that this year. So we're already doing our checks and to see which projects might be viable to receive the renewable diesel, and coming up with the estimated volumes related to that. Lastly, here is our transition to electric where feasible. So this is fairly similar to what others have already touched on. We're looking at electrified fleet vehicles, trucks and SUVs, small mobile equipment like your Mini X's and lifts and forklifts. We're keeping an eye on the hybrid technology. There is some available on the larger mobile equipment. We're trying to pilot that where we can to see what the efficiency is like on those compared to regular equipment. I think the other thing there is just to keep an eye on the type of even the type of combustion engine you're using in your equipment. Some are more efficient than others, and being mindful of the availability of newer engines is still valuable. And then the temporary power with the BESS, which is a battery energy storage solution, we've been trialing that in a few projects where in the right use case scenarios, we find it's very valuable to pair a generator with a battery, have the battery do most of the power supply, and let the generator just charge the battery. Kind of very similar to a hybrid car in the sense that obviously it uses the battery as much as possible, and you're burning less fuel because it doesn't need to run all the time. And then lastly, like we mentioned before, grid connection is paramount, avoiding the use of the temporary power. And also, having that grid connection makes it more viable for us to support electric charging where we can. That's it. I'll pass it off to Anya. Thank you. Did I hit that too soon? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Prab. So I'll give you the multiplex perspective on all this. If you're not familiar with Multiplex, because in the Canadian market, we are quite smaller than AECON and EllisDon, so you might not see as many signs out there on construction projects. But we are an international company, so we pride ourselves for being a local builder, but having a global reach. So we were originally from Australia. That's where we're the biggest. The company was formed back in 1962, so we definitely have a lot of experience in that part of the world. We have an office in the UK that was formed in 1999, also quite significant, quite a lot of projects, particularly in the city of London in the UK. And then the Canadian sector, we were established in Canada in 2011, so much younger than the other regions, but small and mighty. So in the Canadian, we are only 140 plus people. In the Canadian sector, we're generally built in the Greater Toronto area and as far as Kitchener and Whitby, so kind of more local to the city of Toronto. And really what we kind of the key that we bring is that we have that global knowledge from other parts of the world, an opportunity to share knowledge and apply world's best practices across our projects. And a final note, we are also a Brookfield company, so we are under the Brookfield umbrella as well. This is a cool slide, but this kind of gives you just a little bit of a sense of where our projects are at, or the projects that we have built so far in Canada. You kind of have the full list, but some that you might be familiar with in downtown Toronto, the Bay Adelaide Centre, we built the North Tower and the East Tower. Some other projects that we are building right now or have built that, again, Hotel X might be one that is familiar to you. We're currently building the One Delisle condo tower at St. Clair and Yonge, which is a very kind of unique structure, kind of looks like a pine cone a little bit. And our biggest project right now is the Etobicoke Civic Center. So that's a very big project with the City of Toronto, $500 million. It's actually the first civic center that the city is building in the last 50 years, so it's a big deal both for us and the city, so we're very proud of building that. And just another project, this is out in Hamilton, we also built the McMaster Innovation Park, the OmnioBio lab there. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we do, particularly in the local region. Multiplex brand, our purpose is to construct a better future, but just that our values is we keep it real. That's kind of one that kind of resonates a lot, and we have grit, but it's really about everything that we do from a sustainability perspective is really ingrained in our purpose and values. These are our global targets. We also have local targets, which are kind of similar to that with a little bit more detail, but I'll just kind of focus on these ones. So our focus is to be net zero for what we control by 2030. So for our offices, for the buildings that we own and operate, to be net zero by 2030. So not too far from now, and then net zero carbon for our sites. So again, this is everything that we control, so all the fuel that we buy directly. Again, goal of 2030, and then the bigger goal of for net zero for our entire supply chain. So everybody that is on our construction sites, all our subcontractors, everybody that we build, we get materials from. So this is, if you're familiar with the greenhouse gas protocol, it's scope 1, 2, and 3 to be net zero by 2050 at the latest. Prab talked a little bit about the science-based target. We locally in Canada have our science-based target. We kind of proud ourselves to be, we were the first construction company in Canada to get our science-based target, so we kind of like maybe influenced the other ones a little bit. So our science-based target is third-party approved, and that's where our baseline, we started tracking our emissions back in 2020. And then, so we've kind of been building on that knowledge and that experience for quite a few years now. We do have an annual sustainability or ESG report, or we call it impact report, that we release on an annual basis. So you can get a lot of information that I'm presenting now and some more in there. So please go to our website if you're interested to learn more. And then kind of going back to our alliance and the 5 high impact actions. I'm going to be kind of jumping around a little bit between the high impact actions, but the third one was all about renewable diesel. My slide here, this is about biodiesel, which is really a stepping stone. I find like a very important stepping stone to get to renewable diesel, just because there hasn't been supply of renewable diesel, particularly in the region that we are operating in. So having incorporated biodiesel on a lot of our projects, I kind of mentioned in the beginning that one of the dimensions that were identified was that behavior change, and I find that's the most challenging one. And having kind of the awareness and implementing biodiesel in a lot of our projects, that changed a lot of minds within our internal staff, our superintendents, but also for the equipment rental companies and who we source the equipment from, to get them to look and approve using alternative fuel on their diesel equipment. So that's a really important stepping stone from that behavior change perspective. It doesn't provide as much emission reduction, but again, it's I find the key kind of achievement in this goal is to get to that point of now that everybody is, especially as part of the alliance, we're getting that renewable diesel supply in kind of Toronto, Ontario, so that getting that implemented on the project is going to be really very easy, like no constraints from a behavior change perspective. From the heating optimization, Aaron provided a really good perspective on all the elements that you need to take into account in the optimization. The enclosure of the building, the smart systems for our heaters, using efficient heaters, and then planning early. And that planning is really key in making sure that we are using the best equipment, using the smart systems for the equipment, and then just also optimizing the way you are setting up. Maybe it's not the heaters, maybe it's also the fans that push that heating or that heat around the structure as well. So what we've done is like really focus on that engagement and education and getting our superintendents all in a room, talking with the equipment rental suppliers. So everybody is on the same page. Everybody has all the information. They know all the different equipment and smart systems that are available, and they can make the best decisions for their site, because every site is also different. And so you need to make the right plan for your site as well. So yeah, I find education and bringing everybody together is really a key focus that we've had at Multiplex. Also, all this different equipment that's coming to the industry, so those hybrid alternatives, battery power solutions, electric equipment. What we've done is we do Sustainability Month every year. September is our Sustainability Month, and that's really opportunity to really open people's eyes, both from our internal staff, but also the trades that are on our sites, and then also external partners, to let them know about all the different solutions that are available on the market. So we've partnered with our equipment rental companies. They brought in a bunch of their vendors on our site to kind of do a show and tell, really, we call it a sustainability expo, but it's really, we set up all this different equipment on the site for people to really see it in person and ask the actual vendor how does it work best? When does it not work? What's the best conditions to have it? And again, having that opportunity to see it in person, try it out, and having that direct connection with the suppliers. Sorry. Focus on internal collaboration. So we have clear requirements in our contract conditions, and we want to make sure that early in the project, again, getting all the sites, as the sustainability professional, obviously we all know everything that is in the contract condition, what we expect, but do all our people on our site understand that as well? So again, getting that internal collaboration, getting everybody on the same page. We also, as part of our Sustainability Month, and even outside our Sustainability Months, we do expert events quarterly, or maybe even more often, on all different types of subject matter experts from all different topics of sustainability, to hear from the real experts about what are the solutions that are available. And then also from our subcontractor perspective, so our focus is not just our scope 1 and 2, so our direct emissions, but we want our subcontractors to be on the same journey as us. So we actually require all our subcontractors to report on their fuel consumption on a monthly basis. And again, that's part of our contract conditions. We want to know, and we want them to be to have their own systems set up so they can track their fuel, so they can be more efficient about how much fuel they're using. And with being more efficient with fuel, you're also reducing emissions. So having that, now that for all our new projects that since 2024, we're asking all our subcontractors to report on their fuel consumption. And again, like Aaron had a really good graph showing like what are the different, where's the emissions coming from? And I think on his slide is a little bit heavier on the excavation and earthworks. I think it also depends on the type of project that you are working on. But we've seen on projects, especially in the early stages, it could be up to 99% on our subcontractors in terms of the emissions, but then it goes to around 50, again, depending on how much heating we're using and how much when we're actually constructing, and then what other equipment is required. But the subcontractors play such a significant role in the emissions on our site, so we really need them to be on board. And then finally, it's really all about collaboration. We collaborate not just as general contractors, we collaborate with the kind of other professionals within the industry. So we had this collaboration, Low Carbon Now, with an architect, consultants, structural engineer, to really look at where there's opportunity to reduce emissions for the building. And of course, really the alliance, the Canadian Construction Sustainability Alliance, has been very impactful. I think for all of us as general contractors, having the opportunity to share our knowledge and work as a collective and have a collective voice as general contractors in industry has been really impactful. And I promised you a QR code. So this is the QR code for the report. You can find the executive summary there, as well as the full report. The full report is 100 pages. Kudos to you if you go through the whole thing. But that concludes our presentation. Thank you for coming, and we will open it to a Q&A. So if you have any questions, just let me know.
This isn't like that.
No.
Hi, thanks for your presentations. So you hear a lot about slowdown in housing construction in Canada. I'm wondering if you're seeing a slowdown in the projects you're working on, and how does this slowdown in the construction industry impact like implementing and achieving those sustainability goals?
I'll start as I can come back to you guys. Not too much on our end in terms of slowdown. I think we're kind of hitting new highs in revenue personally. So I don't know.
Yeah, we're seeing exactly what EllisDon is seeing. Like we're the busiest that we've ever been. There's a general consensus in construction that, and especially in North America, that we're very behind when it comes to construction in general for critical infrastructure. So we're actually seeing a ramp up. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be updated: bridges, roads, wastewater treatment facilities, and then also the demand for energy, obviously, increasing. So that's leading to a lot of investments in energy-related construction as well.
I think it's just been more of a shift away from residential. So what we see, what we're building, there's definitely been less of that residential market that is available, and also some projects that have paused or maybe hasn't gone through. So just more of a shift, especially for us as a portfolio, really shifting kind of our building portfolio to other sectors, which has been really good for kind of our business and kind of really diversifying. But we've been kind of also lucky in the projects that we've had. We're kind of even before the residential market kind of slowing down, we had kind of that diversified portfolio. So it's just more kind of a shift of what's being built rather than how much is getting built.
So as you talk about moving to net zero and the different sub-trades that you work with or different subcontractors, do you look at their forecast for how much they're doing when they're bidding, or is it that they get the job and then you're tracking their net zero or their sustainability?
As I'm walking back up, I'll answer it. Like, we're focused right now on certain suppliers and trades. So the example I have for concrete is kind of our starting point in terms of asking for that upfront information and assessing it. I think if we asked a lot of our other trades in terms of, what is your emissions or what's your emissions profile like, they may not be quite equipped to answer it yet. So that's something we'd have to work with them to develop more. And part of the tracking pilots and asking them to track it on site helps them gain that information and knowledge.
So for us, all of our subcontractors have to fill out a questionnaire that has safety-related questions as well as sustainability-related questions. So all of them, as a part of their onboarding, have to complete that. And then in terms of our indirect emissions and looking at supply chain, we're also focused on our sort of what we would consider as the most important heavy emitters within the supply chain, and that would be equipment and materials. So specifically focused on looking at concrete suppliers and getting data from them, and that's really driven by the industry. So we're finding that our clients are asking us for that data. Our clients are asking us to use low carbon concrete on site. So similar to EllisDon, we're trying to prioritize concrete data.
Similar to AECON, we also have a questionnaire that that all our subcontractors need to fill out as part of the pre-qualifications and onboarding. But I guess also the question is more specific about, kind of as I mentioned in my presentation, we do require all our subcontractors to report on their fuel consumption and their equipment on site and other information. We don't ask them to necessarily reduce their consumption. It's really at this stage is getting them into the habit of actually getting the information and being aware of where their baseline is at, because a lot of the subcontractors don't even know from an emissions perspective what does their operations actually represent. So we are aware and we're pushing our subcontractors to look into that space again, but it's not something that is really getting evaluated against when we decide who to work with. But we do have an expectation as part of our contract conditions that they do report on our fuel consumption. And we haven't really had pushback on that. Once everybody's on the job and they understand what we're asking for, that information kind of flows. So it's really more so about getting everybody on the same page in terms of understanding the requirements and having a baseline. And then next step, which is we're not quite ready for it now, would be like actually evaluating different subcontractors based on their kind of fuel consumption or their goals or the mandates that they've set.
Hi, thank you. So I have a question on similar to that, but towards the owner side. So there's a bunch of sustainability initiatives, and my background in construction management, and then recently I was with the developer. So it's great when it's aligned, when the developer wants certain sustainability initiatives, but there might be occasions where you have sustainability initiatives and the developer doesn't align with them. But you still want their project. For example, he was talking about smart generators and the cost offsets it. But in some occasions where your initiatives aren't financially net zero, how does that work with the owners? How's the reception for it?
That's a really good question, because those essentially are the two buckets we're dealing with. We have clients who are asking us to integrate sustainability. They know exactly what they're looking for. And then we have clients who aren't necessarily asking us, and those are the ones that we would categorize as sort of the influence bucket. So we at AECON have something called the Green Menu, and it's something that we've built in partnership with our suppliers. And it's essentially a comprehensive list of sustainable construction equipment, site accessories, materials that are available. And then what we've done is, for some of them that we've done pilots for, we've established what the business case is. So we've always maintained that we will not ask our clients, especially the ones we're influencing, to spend more if there isn't a business case to justify the use of that piece of equipment or material. So what we'll do is sort of at the start of projects, we do engagements with our clients, and we'll say, okay, these are the sustainability related opportunities that you can implement on site that won't cost you anything more. So that's how we approach it. We've always maintained that there has to be a business case in order for us to even present it as an option and influence that client.
Yeah, it's obviously a lot easier when there's the alignment between the client and ourselves, or even if the client is pushing even more. It's obviously makes things a lot easier. But it's like, as Prab said, there's things that don't necessarily cost more money. It's about really making our operations more efficient. So it's more internal rather than what the client is asking for. So yes, there's the element of influence for sure. We provide all the options, and if it's a go, that's great. If it's not, then maybe not on this project. But we also try to align with the clients that have kind of more alignment in that space as well, so it's more so kind of the clients that we want to work with are the ones that are more aligned. So there's a broad range in terms of clients that we work with and what's their interest in thinking outside the box and kind of having more efficient construction operations. But yeah, it's kind of like influence where we can and then implement the things that don't necessarily need the client's approval for.
Yeah, like a lot of stuff we talked about, our on-site emissions and our direct emissions, we have control over that. And kind of regardless of what the client might have in terms of their initiatives, we can still implement those, right?
Hello, I'm with a group called Rethink Four Walls, and I'm wondering about, I don't see in all the projects you've done so far anything that's about retrofitting projects. And I'm wondering what the appetite is for retrofit projects that hope to reuse embodied carbon, likely concrete structure that could be reused. Are you looking at any of those projects? Would you look at those types of projects?
Yeah, it's not my direct area personally, but I know we did have a group that was looking directly at office to residential initiatives and validity there. I think there was challenges they found in that, but I know we did start and we did look at it, and it was something that it didn't really maybe take off the way we had hoped it would, based on the validity and feasibility of doing those types of retrofits anyway.
I'll pass it to Multiplex because we don't do a lot of buildings.
We definitely have bid on projects. We haven't had any projects in the Canadian business. In UK, we've done a lot of adaptive reuse as well as in Australia. So we kind of have the global knowledge, but in terms of kind of where the Canadian sector is, it's definitely something that we want to get into. We just haven't had the opportunity to, but we see there's more and more projects that are, or it's really up to the client, the owners to go in that direction, but we see there's more projects that are going in that direction right now.
The not-for-profit that are involved with Rethink Four Walls is about trying to get people like yourself to understand the ROI and the return on it. And it'd be great to get your experiences with globally so that you can build this report for a Canadian perspective so groups can get to know.
Build up the use case. Yeah. Yourself too?
Hi, I'm a community organizer trying to get support for industry that is green, that's building infrastructure and really disturbing people during that construction stage. I see a lot of stuff around heat. What about extreme heat temperatures that you're operating in during the summertime? I don't see any responsiveness to that. Is there no need to respond to it?
My experience with that is it typically falls under our safety group's umbrella to cover the risks, and in terms of our operations, when we're doing work and constructing, the risks around heat stress and the preventative measures we have to take for all of our people on site and the employees and their subtrades as well. I don't know if that quite covers it, but that's the first thing that popped in my head when I think about extreme heat conditions.
Yeah, and extreme heat, extreme weather, and climate change are an enterprise risk for AECON. I mean, it's a risk for the construction industry in general, and it is something that we report on and include in our enterprise risk management that goes straight to our board. And within, if you break that down further, so impact of extreme weather is on infrastructure as well as employees. So there is the impact, looking at the impact of extreme weather in general in terms of how we operate on site and impact on employees. But on a day-to-day operational level, it is something that falls under a health and safety program. So we do have protocol in place for extreme heat and extreme cold weather temperatures and what the ideal temperatures are for employees to be working outside.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a more and more prominent issue to deal with, especially with the kind of more significant number of days of extreme heat that we're dealing with. We see, especially also with our equipment rental companies, that they provide the cooling options. So it's not just about the heating; it's now the cooling options as well. So yes, it is. It's not as prominent as the heating requirements, but it will likely, as climate change progresses in the future years, it will likely kind of take more of that energy requirement for the cooling element as well. But we're not quite there yet, I find.
You guys want to do rock, paper, scissors? Who goes first? Or? Okay, thank you. Thanks for volunteering.
Thanks. My name is Hassan. I'm with the Toronto Environmental Alliance. We do a lot of advocacy at City Hall. I'm wondering to what extent do your companies and organizations actually do advocacy work in favor of things like green building standards at various levels of government, including the municipal?
Yeah, I'll say quickly on our end. I think one of the slides that I probably rushed through too fast talks about our participation in a lot of technical advisory committees, especially with the CAGBC, and helping to define their new evolving, certifications and programs related to that. So that's the first thing that comes to my head.
Yeah, our involvement in advocacy would be through the working groups that we're a part of. So the Canadian Construction Alliance, as well as this alliance. Actually, one of the topics that we discuss in this alliance, the Canadian Construction Sustainability Alliance, is advocacy. So as a quick example, the government just released funding for electric vehicles. As an alliance, we're looking to respond to that, to essentially advocate for construction equipment and vehicles to be included in that funding. So a lot of that advocacy work is done through the working groups that we're a part of.
Thank you. I have two questions. I'll try to club them together. My first question is, how have you seen the shift or change in the information that's required for you guys from the subcontractors and from the trades, from the point where it all began, where we were setting out all the ESG goals to until now? And where do you think it's going forward to? Do you feel that all the subcontractors are more cooperating more with us? And how does that affect your need and requirement of getting all the data? And my second question would be, my second question is, do you think that, speaking of alignment and the alliance, will there ever be an integrated process where we can all work together with the architects, the developers, and the other consultants just to speak about sustainability on a project altogether, similar to an integrated project delivery or IPD projects? That's all. Thank you.
I'll start with the second one, and that is happening. It's more and more. We see different contract structures that allow us to work together. An alliance structure, if you will, does exist. It's been used on many projects, and it's very effective at everyone getting to the table early and making those right decisions, because the impact you can make up front early is much more significant than trying to do it later on. This first one, I'll say, are, going around and asking for, like, for example, the upfront carbon or the golden warming potential on concrete, and doing that more and more for a lot of the products we buy helps drive that through our subtrades and then getting them more used to providing that information. The more you ask for it, the more that these environmental product declarations, for example, get produced, and the more they are familiar with providing them, and that's been picking up, and it's getting better and better.
I'll touch on the second question. So we are seeing more design build type contract models where general contractors have the opportunity to be involved in the design phase of the project, which really allows for integration of sustainability and collaboration. Envision was a framework that I mentioned. So Envision is a sustainable infrastructure construction framework, essentially. We're seeing more and more of our clients align to Envision, especially federally funded projects. And what Envision essentially forces one to do is collaborate. You need all of your stakeholders involved when Envision is involved, and you actually, there's points associated with the stakeholder engagement element. So I think there's collaboration, I think early on is happening more and more, especially when we're starting to see the use of Envision more in projects.
So I guess I'll focus a little bit more on the subcontractor side of things. So we've seen, since we've incorporated our contract conditions in terms of getting the subcontractor to report on fuel consumption and fuel, I feel like just in general, the industry has evolved. There's a much greater understanding of what climate changes and what our emissions are, but there's still quite a broad range in terms of understanding and how much it's incorporated in the different organizations in terms of the subcontractors. So it's still a range, and what we're trying to do with kind of our initiatives with our getting everybody to report is kind of have more of a baseline across the different subcontractors. They understand that that's a requirement for everybody, regardless of how. If you have a sustainability report or you've set targets, we want you to track your emissions and fuel consumption. So we are trying what we can to kind of level the playing field, but obviously depending on the size of the organization, their kind of breadth in terms of like how much geographically they cover, who their clients are or who they work with, it varies very much. But we are kind of trying, particularly the ones that are more kind of behind and maybe don't have that perspective. Starting point, report on your emissions, understand what it is, all the projects that you're working with Multiplex on, and hopefully that's kind of integrated on other projects as well. Okay, maybe we'll do last question because we're over time.
Thank you for the opportunity. My question is regarding the subcontractors. The emission data you are collecting from the subcontractors, do you have a centralized database for it? My next question is, how are you going to extend this data? Are you going to use this data for future procurement pre-qualifications of the subcontractors? What I want to say is, if the subcontractors are more energy efficient, are you going to give them priority for your procurement?
I'll start. I'll let Anya start, because she just talked about it, and then I'll have something I can add. But.
So I guess the system that we use for collecting the information, Procore is our document management system. So we kind of use, it's a document management system that is used for across all documents on the project. So it's not just for sustainability. And that's what we wanted to make sure is that we don't have like a separate system just for where they need to input the kind of emissions data or the fuel data. It's already incorporated in how how we operate the projects and the systems that our subcontractors already use. So we try to make it really kind of streamlined and easy for them to incorporate. So that's kind of the system where we collect the information, and then we have our internal dashboards where we actually kind of track and see what's the trends and which are the subcontractors that have more significant emissions, and which are those kind of elements of the project that have a more significant impact from the emissions perspective. So for future projects, it's looking at what are those target subcontractors that we want to connect with early to make sure, because they are the ones that represent a significant chunk of the emissions for the project, and we are looking for them to reduce emissions. In terms of when the timeline is that we will be asking from a procurement perspective for them to evaluate who we work with, depending on their kind of energy efficiency or the kind of solutions that they implement. Again, we're not quite there yet. It also depends on who we're working with from a client's perspective, because at the end of the day, it's also kind of what the client is willing to pay for. But at this stage, that's not in the kind of evaluation or analysis that if you're more energy efficient, you get kind of extra points and kind of in the evaluation of who we want to work with. But it is by collecting this data and understanding who is more on board, who is more kind of energy heavy or emissions heavy, we understand who, like kind of the baseline that we're working with. So we have that information. So when the time is right and we are able to make the decisions based on emissions, then we already have that data in our space, but it will take a few more years until that's actually gets incorporated into the analysis. Okay, well, I just want to thank everybody. It's been a really engaging Q&A. I really appreciate all the questions. Thank you for your attention. If you do have additional questions, I think some of us, maybe all of us, will be hanging around a little bit, and then some of us will be in the kind of career space as well. And then feel free to reach out to us as well, maybe on LinkedIn. You have the QR code. And again, thank you so much.